Hey guys, this is Professor Gillian, and we have been, I just made myself really big. Okay. We have been exploring the circulatory system. So we've had a chapter on the blood, and the next chapter will be on the heart, and the third chapter in the circulatory system will be on the blood vessels. So this is the first video that's going to explore the anatomy and physiology of the heart. Cardiology is the study of the heart. And when we look at the circulatory system, we can break it down into two big divisions. You've got the pulmonary circuit and the systemic circuit. So the pulmonary circuit is the one bringing blood to the lungs, and that's where the blood will become oxygenated. And then the systemic circuit then takes that oxygenated blood and delivers it to all the tissues in the body. So here you see a little picture. Here's oxygenated blood returning from the lungs, going to the heart, and it's going to be pumped out to all of the body. And so that is the systemic circuit. The left atrium and the left ventricle compose that systemic circuit. In the tissues, it's going to utilize this oxygen, and CO2 is going to be loaded into the bloodstream, and that blood is going to be returned to the heart and then pumped out to the lungs. And in the lungs, the CO2 is going to be unloaded and breathed out, and the oxygen is going to be loaded into the bloodstream, and then you have that oxygenated blood going once again to the heart. So the circuit sending it to the body is known as the systemic circuit. That is involving the left side of the heart. And the circuit bringing blood to the lungs is known as the pulmonary circuit. That involves the right side of the heart. If you want more information about that, you can view this video included in your PowerPoint presentation. Let's take a closer look at the location of the heart. It's located in a place called the mediastinum. The mediastinum is the space between the lungs. There's other structures in there, such as the esophagus and the trachea, and you can see the aorta here as well. And the heart has a wider region called the base, and then it narrows to a tip known as the apex. The heart is actually fairly centrally located, although the apex does sort of tilt to the left. So here you can see it's along the midline, but then the apex is pointing down to the left. And here you can see it in a cross section. This is the lungs here, and here is a cross section through the heart, and this is through the body of a vertebra. In this x-ray, you can really see the margins of the heart. They're highlighted for you so that can show you where the heart lies in the chest. So now that you know exactly where the heart is located, you can place your hand over your heart. You want to have it fairly centrally located and then tilting a little bit down to the left. Something like that. So if they ask you to put your hand over your heart to sing the national anthem, you might need to do something like that. Or you could try what these people are doing. They might need a little bit of a review in anatomy. And yeah. Okay, so moving along, we'll discuss the pericardium. The pericardium is a sac that encloses the heart. And it's composed of two layers. You have the inner layer known as the visceral pericardium, and you have the outer layer known as the parietal pericardium, and the space between these two layers is known as the pericardial cavity. Now, what's contained in this pericardial cavity is just a little bit of pericardial fluid. And this serous membrane, these two layers of the serous membrane with the heart inside, allows for that heart to beat with very little friction. So here, if we take a closer look, you'll see that the visceral pericardium is the one lining the heart. And if you move up here, it sort of takes a U-turn and then forms this parietal pericardium, this outer layer of the pericardium here. And that little space between, you can kind of see that little space between here. That space between is the pericardial cavity. So if you imagine a balloon that's just slightly inflated and mostly deflated, and you take your fist and you put it into that balloon, that sort of represents the relationship of the pericardium to the heart. So this balloon with just a little bit of air in it. The air will represent that pericardial fluid. And as your fist goes in there, there's a layer next to your fist. That would represent the visceral pericardium. And then there's the outer layer of the balloon that represents the parietal pericardium. So your fist is surrounded by the pericardial sac, but it is not inside the pericardial cavity. What's inside the pericardial cavity is just a little bit of pericardial fluid, just like what's inside the balloon is just a little bit of air. So the balloon surrounds the hand just like the pericardium surrounds the heart. The pericardium can become inflamed, and if this happens, it's known as pericarditis, and it can be a very painful condition. All right, let's take a closer look at the wall of the heart now. And so here you can see they've done a section through the heart, and you can see this outermost layer here. We just called it the visceral pericardium, and now it's labeled epicardium. Well, it has two names. What can I say? So if you're talking about the pericardium, you might refer to it as the visceral pericardium. But if you're talking about the heart wall, you might refer to it as the epicardium. Same exact structure. So moving a little bit deeper into the heart wall, you'll see here, this is the myocardium. Myo means muscle. So this is the layer of the heart composed with a lot of cardiac muscle. And if you look at this picture here, you see this cardiac muscle sort of spirals around. And so when the ventricles contract, it sort of has this ringing motion. There's also a fibrous skeleton in the heart. And this fibrous skeleton will actually insulate the atria, from the ventricles. And so when the atria contract, the signal will travel all through the atria at once, and then it has to go through a special conduction system for that signal to get to the ventricles. And we'll take a closer look at that a little bit later on. But moving along with our heart wall, we saw this outer epicardium and the middle myocardium, and now we're going to look at the endocardium. And this is the interior lining of the heart, and it's lined with endothelium. And endothelium is a simple squamous epithelium, so a single layer of flat cells. And this endothelium is continuous with the endothelium that you find in blood vessels. And as blood vessels get smaller and smaller and smaller and form teeny little capillaries, we're going to see that the capillaries consist of one single layer of this simple squamous cell. So one single layer of endothelium is what forms the walls of capillaries. So in here we'll see that this endocardium of the heart has this endothelium lining it. That helps keep it smooth. It helps keep the blood from sticking to the chambers of the heart. And in this slide, you can see the layers of the pericardium. So maybe we can come up here to see that. You've got the outer parietal pericardium and the inner visceral pericardium. And if you remember, that inner visceral pericardium is also known as the epicardium. So here you can see that inner visceral pericardium, also known as the epicardium. And the myocardium is all this muscular portion in here. And the endocardium forms this lining of the interior of the heart.